There has been a ton of press around Donald Trump's interview with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News last week, and I already talked a lot about the politics in the interview, the things Trump said, the incorrect allegations and assertions that Donald Trump made. But there is a 47-second section of this interview that isn't getting nearly the discussion it deserves, which exposes what I consider to be the real Donald Trump, the truly terrible, toxic, bad person that Donald Trump is to be around. And this is kind of buried in part 3 of the interview with George Stephanopoulos. What ABC News did is divide the interview into 3 parts. The first 2, I think, are each about 12 or 13 minutes long. And part 3, at least as I saw it divided up on the ABC News YouTube channel, is much shorter. And in part 3, George Stephanopoulos is pressing Donald Trump about his financial disclosures. And Trump is going into one of these nonsense talking point rants that he gives, which are never really answers. They often contradict. The thing he says in the first 15 seconds contradicts the thing he says in the second 15 seconds. He says he won't release his financial disclosure, but he hopes that eventually people see it, even though he could release it any time. And in the midst of Donald Trump talking about this, there's a cough in the background, okay? And Trump stops talking, and the look on his face changes. He looks all of a sudden rabid, and he says he wants to do it over again because his chief of staff is coughing in the background. Now, it's actually pretty interesting that ABC News even included this in the final cut because Trump asked for it to be redone, and then he redoes his answer with equally nonsensical talking points. But when you hear him talking about the cough in the background, when you see the look on his face, when you hear the vitriol and the toxicity in his voice, Trump sounds like he thinks the people around him, including his chief of staff who coughed, are just worthless, barely human forms of life. And this is the Trump we've thought was the real Trump from all of the reports about him, from former employees, former campaign officials, from reports about his relationships with his own families, his own family members, and with his various mistresses and women he's had affairs with. The audio tells us a lot. It's better if you're watching this so that you also see the anger and the disgust on Donald Trump's face. Someone coughing. This is a brief appearance of the real Donald Trump, which I believe Trump didn't think would ultimately be published as part of the interview. But still, if you're even willing to treat people like this in front of George Stephanopoulos and an entire ABC crew, plus your own staff and security, how is he behaving in more truly private settings? Take a look at these 47 seconds of video.
Much bigger, much better than anybody. They're after my financial statement. The Senate, they'd like to get my financial statement. At some point, I hope they get it.
You're going to turn it over?
No, at some point, I might. But at some point, I hope they get it because it's a fantastic financial statement. It's a fantastic financial statement. And let's do that over. He's coughing in the middle of my answer.
Yeah, okay.
I don't like that, you know?
Your chief of staff.
If you're going to cough, please leave the room.
Get a shot of, and I'll come over here.
You just can't.
Just to change the shot.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Trump.
Okay, do you want to do that a little differently then?
Yeah, we just changed the angle. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
So at some point, I look forward to, frankly, I'd like to have people see my financial statement.
There's a literal Jekyll and Hyde transformation that you see on Donald Trump's face when Mulvaney coughs. Trump stops playing the character that he's playing in the interview, and he becomes the real Trump. And by the way, what does it even mean that it's a financial statement that's fantastic? And if it's so good, why isn't Trump going to publish it? That's a whole other discussion to be had. But this is the real Trump. He is a terrible person. He has no empathy for anyone, period. He's horrible to be around. He's self-centered to the absolute maximum. He could have indicated that he didn't like the cough and he wanted to do it over by saying, sorry, George, 1 second. Mick, are you okay? And done it over again. Any non-narcissist would have behaved completely differently here. And this is one of the most disturbing parts of the interview as Donald Trump sits there with pure malice in his eyes for his own chief of staff. It was actually suggested, and this makes it even more interesting, it was suggested that Trump was making such a fool of himself with his answer on this financial disclosure issue to George Stephanopoulos that Mulvaney might have coughed deliberately to ruin what Trump was saying because it was so stupid and dumb in order to give Trump an out. And if that's true, and we don't know if it is, that would actually make Donald Trump's treatment of Mulvaney even more stunning. even though it wouldn't surprise me that Donald Trump simply wouldn't be smart enough to realize that Mulvaney was trying to help Trump and trying to get him out of trouble. In any case, that's the real Donald Trump. That is the real Donald Trump, who is an absolute disgrace and nightmare to work for, exposed very briefly in 47 seconds of audio and video. I encourage you to watch the entire interview because the whole thing is a pathetic gong show.